Welcome to Down the Road. I've got some news for you a little bit later in the show, news that you're going to want to hear. Also, I'm going to make sure that we get a chance to give you a window and insight into what happened with the January 6th committee tomorrow. But with what's all going on with President Trump or ex-President Trump or former President Trump, I can tell you there's a lot of questions circling around. A lot of them. So I don't know anybody else that's better to go to than Dakota Rudesill. Dakota is a senior faculty fellow and co-leader, Security and Governance Research Cluster. And this man is someone that knows what he's doing. I've been on his campus. I've seen how he's creating and having an opportunity to help young people learn their craft, learn their trade, and I just respect the heck out of him. Dakota, good to have you coming down the road with us again.
Hey, it's great to be here. Always a pleasure and always fun.
I want to talk to you about these hearings. There's a lot of speculation about what might happen. We saw yesterday, with Cassidy Hutchinson, we saw a woman that was 23 when all of this happened and is 25 now. You can't get younger, in my opinion, to be the top aide to the chief of staff of the White House. The woman had talent, or has talent, and she stuck her neck out yesterday like you wouldn't believe, testifying in front of that January 6th committee about what was going on behind the scenes, what we saw. She had the courage to testify. She didn't take the fifth. I want your take on it. As you look at her testimony, what did you see?
Yeah, well, first of all, I saw a very brave young person, as you note, at the start of her career, taking on a former president who wants to be president again, and just, showing a tremendous integrity and tremendous courage in responding to Congress's call to say what she saw and to say what she knows. And, if you watched it in full, if you've been, seeing the clips online and reading the coverage, it was tremendously gripping. I don't know if there's ever been a hearing conducted by Congress that was more dramatic than what we heard. And I think, frankly, pretty damning about the state of mind of President Trump at the time and the things that he was doing and was aware of. So just enormously important testimony by her.
The whole system of government that you're teaching, that when it comes to America, is based upon honesty. It is. It's based upon someone putting their right hand to God and saying, I will tell the truth. She did that. Others who are criticizing her today didn't do that or won't do that, or the one word that they've learned that they repeat and repeat is fifth. And so walk me through your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, there's no substitute for personal integrity. You can have all the laws you want, you can have all the processes you want, but unless you have individuals, people who have the courage of their convictions and understand that they have obligations that are higher than their personal immediate self-interest, than their party's political interest, and put those things above those immediate personal interests and party interests. And those are things such as the rule of law, the safety of people, telling the truth. And she reflected all of that. So she is absolutely a profile in courage. And I think contemplating a potential criminal trial for former President Trump and the people around him, I think that she would make a very powerful witness in person in court. And certainly, everything that she said before, she was a sworn witness before the United States Congress. I think that she would be very powerful and compelling. Now, I don't think that it's a slam dunk by any means that President Trump would be convicted, or even that the Justice Department would bring charges. To date, no former president has been charged with a crime by the Department of Justice. So that would be a dramatic step, and he would certainly have some defenses. But I think that her testimony yesterday was a game changer in terms of his potential criminal liability and the people around him.
when it comes to Donald Trump, there's been a lot of no former presidents. Bump. So there's no question about that. I've said many times, I don't know if it's in the best interest of America for him to be charged with a crime. I do know this: if he's charged with a crime, he needs to be convicted. If he's charged with a crime and isn't convicted, it's just going to play into this whole narrative of, see, they were out to get you. Already, when it comes to Ms. Hutchinson, they're out after her. They're claiming that it's all hearsay, that she wasn't there. How would she know? I've been making the argument on radio that it's easy to counter her if you're willing to put your right hand to God and testify yourself. Some of those individuals aren't, but yet they're finding ways to criticize her. One of the areas that they're hitting her hard on today is in the area of Secret Service. Can Secret Service testify? If they can testify, they'd get called for a whole lot of things, it would seem to me, Dakota. But where is that at? Can they testify?
Well, absolutely. They're employees of the United States government, and so they can testify in criminal trials. I haven't looked into it to see if it's happened, but I'm sure it has happened. The Secret Service actually, in addition to being the security detail of the president, the president's family, and other top cabinet members, actually has a large role in enforcing a number of federal crimes. And so, I'm quite positive that they've been testifying in many criminal trials. There certainly could be efforts by a current president to restrict the ability of somebody in the Secret Service to testify on the basis of executive privilege. What's important is Donald Trump is no longer president, and the power to invoke executive privilege now lies with his successor, Biden. And Biden, in a number of other circumstances, has absolutely not invoked executive privilege to protect members of the Trump team. And I would not expect that would happen here.
When you look at it, one of the big disputes they're making is over whether or not the president, in demanding that they take him to an insecured area, the Capitol on January 6th, they're demanding or they're stating that it's just not true, that in the Beast, which is the president's vehicle that day, that he reached up and said, "I'm the president, you're going to take me," after they told him it was insecure and they were taking him back to the West Wing, and he actually grabbed at the steering wheel. So by the Secret Service testifying, it would seem to me that we can get to the bottom of that or not.
Yeah, well, certainly. And my understanding is that one of the agents in question was sitting there yesterday and did nothing to contest that, and that it's other people who are contesting this account that she provided. What this would come down to in court is dueling testimony. There are limits on hearsay, but hearsay is limited to testimonial statements, meaning words that somebody said. What you can articulate is, my understanding of events is X and Y. You can certainly say that, and she's a powerful witness in that respect because of where she was. She was sitting at the right hand of the chief of staff to the president. She was in virtually all the meetings he did, taking notes, sitting in on conversations. And so she was privy to a vast amount of information, and somebody in that role is going to have a lot of credibility if they stay in that role, right? They're trusted by the chief of staff to the president to be that note taker. So I think that her testimony about her understanding of situations would be powerful. And then she also just immediately directly saw a lot and heard a lot, and she can testify to that. I saw this happen. I saw that happen.
Dakota, I'm going to ask you something I think I know the answer to. Have you ever asked for a pardon?
Have I?
Yes.
No, and I hope I never do.
Yeah, and I never have either. And if I did, I know I'd be awful worried about whether or not I was going to be charged with a crime or was guilty of a crime. What we're finding out through that testimony yesterday is that a number of people, at the end, everybody was rushing in and saying, "I want one of those pardons." How big of a factor is that when the individuals that have come in and asked for a pardon are not willing to testify? How does that stand up in a court of law?
Well, it's certainly a bad sign when, anybody involved in an alleged criminal conspiracy has asked for a pardon. Generally, you don't do that sort of thing unless you are profoundly worried that that the Justice Department, the prosecutors are going to get enough evidence to take a case at you. I think that reflects a sense among a lot of people at senior positions in the executive branch, from the chief of staff of the president to Rudy Giuliani, the kind of ad hoc legal advisor to the president, to multiple members of Congress, that they understood that something that was going on was really bad news, and could involve all sorts of criminal liability. Certainly a really bad sign, I think, for, somebody who wants to maintain, this was just a regular presidential speech, and there were some protesters who walked to the Capitol. And, as Congressman Jim Jordan has said, they looked like tourists walking through the Capitol, after, having a violent assault for hours, breaking windows, sacking the office of the speaker, the parliamentarian, just vile, a desecration of that place with, graffiti and feces and whatnot. I mean, I worked at the U.S. Capitol for 9 years. I never saw anything like that. What I saw was when a single person tried to enter the Capitol building on an unauthorized basis, the Capitol Police drew their weapons and fired, right? One person. Here we had 10,000 people violently attacking the Capitol, resulting in 5 deaths, so many injuries, and the interruption of a constitutional process. And that was their explicit aim, was interruption of a constitutional process. It's hard to imagine anything better qualifying as a riot under federal law or seditious conspiracy.
Can I ask you this? Can the President of the United States, coming from a state with very open records, things that you can access in the state of North Dakota, I like our open records law, but on a national scale, could the President have issued secret pardons we don't know about that he did before he left office?
It is a theoretical possibility, and indeed one that President Trump's former fixer, his closest lawyer throughout his career, was a guy named Michael Cohen. And Michael Cohen has since been disbarred. He's gone to prison for crimes he committed on Donald Trump's behalf. And he has said, he said he didn't see it, but it's his understanding that Donald Trump probably did issue secret pardons for himself, for his children, for Rudy Giuliani and other people around them, and that they're probably stocked away in a safe at Mar-a-Lago for former President Trump to pull out at any time. The problem is, number one, in the entire history of the country, the president has never issued a secret pardon, ever. It was understood by Alexander Hamilton, writing in the Federalist and the Founders, to be a public act that the president did, saying, I am taking on the political stain, if you will, of saying that this person who's been charged or convicted is not going to face penalty, right? They're taking that on, right? And then there's opportunity for the public and the Congress to review what the president did, evaluate their judgment, vote them down or remove them from office. It's a public act, so that's never happened. And as I've argued in a piece I wrote, I think any court confronted with a former president saying, I signed a secret pardon before I left office, any court and any prosecutor has got to reject that, because here's the risk. A pardon is permanent. And if a former president says, when I was back in office, I signed this secret pardon, right? There's no way to ascertain that president wasn't lying and then wrote that secret pardon after leaving office. And we just can't allow a former president to exercise the powers of office to get people out of violating federal law. So we've never had this situation. It's never been tested in court. But as I wrote, a court has got to reject an alleged secret pardon.
The January 6th committee, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to add, it's a bipartisan committee. Whether you feel it's bipartisan or not, they are proving they are bipartisan. That committee is doing its job. It's not doing it with all the glamour and the fanfare and everything that goes with it. They're just doing their job piece by piece by piece. And what people are finding out is staffers that are in the room have just as good a memory as anyone else. We're talking about with Dakota Rudesill, and of course, I introduced Dakota before, but his background, his understanding of law and what he's teaching. Seditious conspiracy state. I want you to talk about that, because I want to know where you see that going, that the statute and how you see that might be in effect here.
Yeah, well, so the seditious conspiracy laws, and for anybody following along at home with the internet or your law books, that's 18 USC 2384. This is a very...
You do your homework, Dakota.
Here.
There's no question about that.
Trying to be the law prof here, you know, earn my keep. So this is a very old statute. It's been around for a long time, hundreds of years. And I'll read you just the relevant text here for our purposes. It says, if two or more persons conspire to overthrow, put down, or destroy by force the government, or oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force seize, take, or possess any property of the United States, contrary to the authority thereof, they can be fined or imprisoned. Right? So that's pretty clear, right? Conspire to overthrow, put down, destroy, oppose by force, delay the execution of the law, right? Every piece of that, and any of those is fine for a conviction under the seditious conspiracy statute. You know, plainly, this is what we saw among a lot of people at the Capitol on January 6th, and we've had now several dozen. I think it's between 10 and 20 seditious conspiracy charges filed against these right-wing militias, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and it's possible too that we could see a seditious conspiracy charge against the president and other people in the office his team.
So, what about the riot itself? Okay, I understand that the attempt to overthrow the government, that's the big one. But obviously the riot, I mean, you mentioned 5 people died because of this. Obviously one of the rioters was shot. Everyone knows that. But Capitol Police and what happened to them later on, certainly this played a major role in how we lost some of them. So what about the fact that the President of the United States and the individuals that spoke that day wanted, knowing that these individuals had weapons, knowing that they couldn't pass the test of getting into the president's rally, and yet the president sent them to the Capitol fully armed. What does that do? Is there a crime against an intent to riot?
Mm-hmm. Well, so there is a statute about that as well, incitement of rioting, and it concerns anyone who travels in interstate commerce. And, you know, the vast majority, how many D.C. residents, right, were part of the 1/6 insurrection? That's pretty much everybody with intent to incite a riot, to organize, promote, participate in, commit any act of violence in furtherance of a riot, or aid and abet. That will embrace a lot of people at 1/6. It could embrace the president as well. I anticipate that those members of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, and incidentally, the founder of the Oath Keepers is a graduate of my own law school and should know better, but I anticipate that he's going to try to make an argument, and I think some of the others in these militias, is that they're the militia under the Constitution, and that the president gave an order to them to take action, and that they were acting on that basis. That's got to fail in court, and it's got to fail in court for a couple of reasons. I'll just be very brief about this. Number one, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution gives Congress total control to organize, discipline, and govern that militia that then the president commands as the commander-in-chief. And Congress, by statute, has said the organized militia is the National Guard. And then it says the rest of the militia is unorganized, right? Number one. Second, Congress has written a whole bunch of criminal laws, right, which apply to taking action against the United States government. And, you know, there's no precedent suggesting that the president can just say to any man between 17 and 46, which is the statutory definition of the unorganized militia, the president can't just point to somebody in America with a gun and just say, okay, you're the militia, I want you to physically attack somebody. Right? I mean, there's just nothing about our legal regime that suggests that. So I think that those claims are going to fail by the Proud Boys. And I think that if you tried to get some sort of claim by the president to that effect, it would also fail.
What about the president himself? Merrick Garland, the current attorney general, many people have been criticizing him because he hasn't dealt himself a hand in all of this. It seems to me that the January 6th committee is gathering information that he might use. What about, I know it's speculation, but could the president of the United States, for the first time, ever be charged with a crime?
I think it's absolutely conceivable. I think as a legal matter, it's pretty clear. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that the president can't be charged with a crime. We've had a vice president, Spiro Agnew, who was Richard Nixon's vice president. He was charged with felony tax evasion while vice president and pled out. And we have other precedents too of senior executive branch officials, right? There's no reason that can't reach the president. And importantly, Gerald Ford, who succeeded in the presidency after Richard Nixon, one of his first acts was to pardon Richard Nixon, right? So it's very clear that the president can face criminal liability. So I think that that's entirely possible. Again, I think that President Trump would try to assert some sort of, he's the guy defending the government, right? And it's, I don't know, maybe he'd allege that it's Congress that was trying to conspire to overthrow, or all these election officials, the Republican elected Secretary of State of Georgia was trying to conspire to overthrow the government. It's just, these are just wild claims, and I can't imagine that would succeed. I think that what the president would also try to argue is that his speech was protected by the First Amendment, and we're going to see that as well from just kind of everyday folks who who attacked the Capitol, the rioters. The Supreme Court's test there sets a very high bar. This is the Brandenburg case. Again, for our lawyers out there. So in the Brandenburg case, the Supreme Court said that the government cannot prohibit advocacy of illegal conduct unless that speech is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such an action. Now, in the majority of the cases that have been brought, where there's been this defense, right, by somebody just saying like, hey, I was just saying like so-and-so is a scoundrel and somebody should do something about that, right? They have a First Amendment defense, right? They're just expressing their minds and, there's no imminent lawless action. But I think here with the president, if it can be established, as was testified yesterday, that the president knew there were armed people in this crowd, and he wanted to lead them to the president, lead them down to the Capitol, right? And was asserting that they needed to stop, the Congress doing its constitutional duty, and that he was, saying favorable things about these hang Mike Pence chants. If these things can be established, I think it does meet the test of directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and likely to incite. I think that the Justice Department could do that. It's a massive step for the Justice Department to, charge a current or former president. And like you, I've been really, frankly, I was hoping that he would be impeached and removed and barred from further office. But it is now a question on the table about whether former President Trump could be charged.
Dakota, always good to talk to you, man. Thank you. Thank you for your knowledge, and thanks for sharing it with us here on Down the Road.